welcome. I just want to take an opportunity to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you're at. This is VP. I am bringing you this information in hopes that it touches enough people and gets enough people asking questions that they can push the research that I've already done a little bit further. The fundamentally important thing about flat Earth goes way beyond the shape of where we live. If indeed a deception is able to be set forward and have so many people believe it, the reason behind that deception is really the most important thing. And I think fundamentally that's what got a lot of people asking, why would they lie about the shape of where we live? What would be important enough to continue on a charade? It is my hope that the theory that I've been working on for 4 years helps to shed some kind of light on that, helps some people begin to see what indeed it could be. There is absolutely no point in us fighting among ourselves. The problem with disseminating information, especially when you disseminate it incorrectly, is that once people take hold of it, and then some of those people begin to question it, whoever started that information is rarely the one being questioned. Instead, what we find is we find a population of people who end up fighting among themselves, when the entire point here is the truth. Whether you believe in globe Earth, flat Earth, concave Earth, hollow Earth, it don't matter. The point here is that at least enough people are asking questions. It's that pursuit of knowledge that we're all after. It's only in the pursuit of knowledge that we are going to have any kind of hope in figuring out what it really is. The minute we stop questioning, that's when we're all in trouble. So you can hate on us however you want. You can call us all the names in the world. It's not going to stop anything. Zero. We're going to keep on inquiring. We're going to keep on searching out the facts. And we do that for the best of all of us. Because Lord forbid, those who believe in the globe should be proven wrong. I want to see it when you sit down in your chair and the revelation cross your mind and you've finally been proved wrong of everything I thought was incorrect. Before you ever get there, there's been enough of us who have set our ass down in that same position with the hopes of answering that one question, so you don't have to struggle the same way. So that maybe there's a clearer picture one day. If not for you, let's hope it's there for your kids. Because if most of you who watch this already have kids, it's one thing being lied to yourself. Are you cool with your kids being lied to? Is that all right with you? Them being misled, them being diverted down a path that's incorrect, that stops them from understanding this world and what it really is, prevents them from having the clear view? Because it's not cool with me at all. I have racked my brain for 4 years strong before I ever made another video to help narrow this down. I hope you appreciate it. If not, I'm sure in the comment box, those of you who are still skeptics, those of you that do not see the point in the truth coming out, even though it's to your own benefit, I could have been stubborn and kept it to myself. I could have been the only one watching and let everybody else fall right off that cliff. Because I don't know you, just like you don't know me. But the one human decency, the one common thread that we have, is that we are all in this together. There is no escape. So what I would have befall you could very well swing around to befall me. So the next time you question somebody in search of the truth, you want to call them stupid, you want to call them retarded, you want to call them whatever names you want to come up with, keep it in mind that not knowing the truth might very well come to bite you in your ass. Enjoy.
The theory of a surrogate civilization. What if we have become a surrogate civilization and our world is being used for the creation of another, a new civilization who from the very beginning will know the very best of our technological achievements? And so the need and desire of those who run this world to control all of us within it can best be understood in these terms. The world as we know it and all of the people within it have for some time now been used as a labor force in order to fund and supply the elite's secret endeavor, and we are expected to continue to supply and fund its growth for as long as they are able to fool us into doing so, because it is no longer important for them to prevent this world from an eventual cataclysm or catastrophe, but rather it serves their need to do away with us once our purpose has been served and their objectives have been realized, which means that if we wait until that point to start realizing that the world around us is indeed a lie and that we were deceived, then it will be too late for even our awakening as a people to prevent what we will have allowed to befall us. Meanwhile, they will have the time to have either left or be leaving to inherit a more technologically advanced new world and civilization, one with a new origin story that has absolutely no cultural ties to our own, nor does it have the differences that divide us. And that is the point of their endgame. And reaching that goal has been the motivation of all of their lives up to this point. So you must pause for a moment to consider that their probes into this world and efforts undertaken towards exploring the furthest and most difficult to reach places in our known/unknown world were for them, once those secrets were understood, a quite literal step up in evolution, a point at which a decision was made, not for disclosure, but instead in favor of discovery discreetly. And it would be that singular decision, once made and committed to, that would forever change the landscape of the world as we know it. Their success thriving off of our chaos, disorder, division, and conflict, to push forward and propel both industry and technology in the hyperdrive in order to fuel and fund the new world they are creating away from all of us. The most ambitious escape plan to have ever been conceived or attempted, rationalized and accepted in secret among the elite as the new answer for the continuation of a new mankind, a 22nd century reboot of humanity. This time, the point must be made that the elite's ultimate success is almost completely dependent upon our civilization's eventual destruction, and that only in the aftermath of that destruction will their agenda be fully realized in order for that new civilization to take center stage. This is why the condition of our world seems to no longer matter, hint, as if taking care of this one is of no concern. It's because they have found another. They know it will never fall in their lap, but we as a people do not seem to understand that it is going to fall in ours. Even as I write this, our world is being stripped in mind of every fathomable resource that one could imagine, leaving us without the very building blocks necessary for us to stop what is happening, let alone what it will take to come back from the future that they have in store for us. It is important to know that while this concept that I am presenting to you may indeed sound brand new, it is actually based on a much older doctrine and method utilized during times of conquest from as far back as you may care to research. The best recent example being the Europeans' so-called discovery of a new world and how it became the United States of America as we know it. This method and how it specifically applies to the discovery and acquisition of new territories, whether known or unknown, but without an officially recognized claim, is more simply known today as settle first or development first. But let me pause for a moment to say that this is a well-known concept for the highest officials within the most powerful governments of countries today. It is also a method rarely, if ever, disclosed or discussed in private or public with any country's citizens for very good reason. First and foremost being that no country wants to ever have to admit to or acknowledge its own wrongdoing. There is no room that needs to be made for explanation for any actions taken during a time as long as the topic at hand remains officially unacknowledged. Settle first is a method used specifically as it pertains to new territories that basically states that in the process of acquiring a new territory, a nation can, regardless of native inhabitants, cost to plant or animal life, or any negative effects upon that territory's land, its natural resources, or people, use force or any other means that it deems necessary in order to put in place a permanent settlement prove its sovereignty, and state its rightful claim upon the land borders, as well as any national resources that it may contain. As long as that new territory and its native inhabitants do not hold nor have ever made an officially recognized land state claim that proves ownership or sovereignty, meaning that whatever nation is able to take over that territory with the intent to settle that land and control its borders will be considered that new territory's sovereign owner and shall be officially recognized as its rightful claim holder due to its continual occupation, control, and peaceful display of sovereignty over it. Period. And this should sound familiar because it is the basic framework and technique used by the first European settlers during their conquest for America. It also explains the reason for killing, displacing, and enslaving the native aborigines that were occupying North America long before their arrival. This includes the rewriting of those native cultures' history, birthplace, and other important factors of their culture in order to avoid any future claim that could be made by those natives once the takeover was completed, thus making America itself a topic that has always been shrouded and built upon its own deceptions, cover-ups, and lies from the very start of its conception. Having used its structure of government, willingness to deceive, questionable practices, and advancements in technology against everyone and everything that has ever stood in the way of its agenda. Not only back then, but stretching across time all the way up to what we find ourselves facing now in the present day regarding our own government. And into the future, it is poised to continue on. And it should come as no surprise to learn that the method of settle first has been brought up again recently and identified by several groups of academics as the #1 out of 5 possible methods that America is most likely to use in the foreseeable future to remain dominant and to keep superior control over the Arctic and its resources, which should cause my fellow researchers to pause for a moment when I explain that the acquisition of any new territory discovered within international waters are governed by even less requirements or oversight than new territories on land, as well as my explanation regarding the settle first method and how it could possibly apply to the Arctic, or more specifically to what we have been told is just the Arctic ice sheet, because it really is time to start questioning what we have been led to believe. Case in point being that all the way up into the 1700s and dating back before the 1500s, many of the world's most sophisticated seafaring and map-making cultures were acutely aware of the continent that was split by 4 rivers and encircled by mountain ranges, a spiritual place that contained a magnetic mountain at its center called Mount Meru, that just so happens to have been located exactly where we are told that only the Arctic ice sheet exists today. The purpose of this video is to answer the question of why would they lie to us about the globe model of Earth? And why not tell us its true shape if indeed it was flat? Why would they lie? And indeed, it's a good question. A question, in fact, that deserves an answer regardless of its complexity. So now that I have laid the basic foundation upon which the answer lies, let me continue. After 4 years and countless hours of research and cross-referencing, the most probable and statistically founded reasoning based upon all of the lessons learned from the past, including the first documented conquests ever recorded by man all the way up to the last, ending with America and then America's fight for independence, before then turning its sight towards becoming the world's strongest superpower, it is safe to say that this country is perhaps the most well-versed in history when it comes down to getting whatever it chooses to set its sights upon, and will stop at nothing in order to achieve its goals for the elite. The evolution of America goes way beyond even that which we are able to see, and it's there that this picture becomes even more in focus once you can piece together America's MO, or mode of operandi. I can remember my late father used to tell me to use my eyes, not my mouth, and went on to explain that the most advantageous position for a man is when, by choice, a man decides to keep what he knows, what he sees, and all that he has learned to himself. For as long as he is able to remain silent, no one will know what he is thinking, nor what actions that he may choose to take, which ultimately forces his opposition to underestimate him and or overlook his true abilities and agendas, which in turn causes them, the opposition, to error and expose themselves, thus leaving themselves vulnerable to that which they do not have reason to see as a threat. So true to form, the longer a man can keep what he knows to himself, the more of a threat and the more in control he actually becomes. And with that being understood, let me point out that America's evolution has taken that logic much further than any man, light years further in fact, to encompass all foreign and domestic people, including all government. America has developed tactics like the telling of things in reverse and has been gradually implementing them on a scale never before seen in all of mankind. That began with the lessons learned through conquest that were then merged with and cultivated right alongside of the lessons learned through the manipulation and influence placed upon all early forms of written print, communication, and media, continuing on through radio and television broadcasts until when, in 1969, it learned the most valuable lesson on how it could use the development and creation of film and its subsequent broadcasts across television networks to fool an entire world into believing whatever narrative it chose to portray, like the moon landing, which was the defining moment whereby it learned how to manipulate human consciousness into believing whatever version of reality that it wanted people to believe or accept. Pandora's box had been opened, and from that point on, it has been used to shape by way of design our understanding of the world, its shape, and everything in it, choosing to, by whatever means necessary, settle first our minds before any other understanding could take hold, fully knowing that any recollection of information up to that point, past to present, would eventually be drowned out by their new present to future approach to the flow of information. Discounting the past in exchange for what was taught and shown to be true in the present, painting pictures in our mind knowing that it would be conveyed to the future, thereby solidifying their control over it. The same future that we now find ourselves in, trying to understand what we are up against, which given the level of technology today, it's safe to say, has been consistently evolving. So to take a page out of their own book, it is what we must do as well. We must evolve as a species. It is time to manifest our collective destiny before they finish doing it for us, because the stage has already been set, made even more scary when you realize, within the context of what I'm saying, how many of the world's religions could be used against us. For example, they could create the Bible's book of Revelation, knowing the effects that it would have, and it's been drilled into our minds for many years. Fertile ground to grow belief, the perfect ground for a diversion, the perfect cover story to mask their action. Also the perfect opportunity to use something such as the rapture theme to snatch up people to take back to their new civilization for purposes unknown. And the only thing crazier than that sound, or how that sound, would be for it to actually happen. So keep that in mind as I continue. To recap the methods that are or have been used against us: knowledge of past conquests, rewriting of history and its effects upon people, the manipulation of all forms of media, the portrayal of the world around us differently than now it actually is, as well as our place in it. But what is missing, and how is it the most relevant factor? What is missing is what is not spoken of. It is what has been masked and continues to be kept from us, and that is what has been learned from the ancients, their knowledge base, those who came long before us, those responsible for the pyramids and all ancient impossibly built structures. For it is that knowledge that has driven the elite to such ends and continues to push their agenda. Second is the information that they have learned regarding the true shape of our world and how everything else fits in it. Third is the technologies acquired that have been kept from us by way of design in order to control us, while at the same time using those technologies to obtain what is thought to be the unobtainable. A pursuit so grand that most would not believe it, which I can completely understand due to the difficulties that I've faced during the process that it has taken me to even be able to conceive it myself. And I am fully aware of its implications, to which I have one thing to say: the truth is more often stranger than fiction. Now it is time for me to substantiate my position by laying out a few breadcrumbs that have helped to bring me to where we find ourselves now. Number one, what does the globe view of our world accomplish? It visually encapsulates the world as we know it, and it effectively places a self-imposed understanding that there is a limit to what we know and what we know to exist. It makes us believe that all land has been discovered, and prevents us from going out in pursuit to find more. It visually reinforces a finite boundary and lessens our urge to explore beyond it, leaving only our imagination to ponder space the way it has been portrayed to us. The never-ending movie of possibilities that lay beyond that is reinforced solely by NASA, film studios, and education, which is enough for us to look past the fact that there are no actual pictures and even fewer humans for us to interact with who have actually been or experienced space for themselves. Second, how do those views play out in their favor? Because once they are believed and accepted, then passed down as truth, few would ever choose to think different. And that buys them time and provides a cover story that they can exploit, such as NASA's budget being used to fund their true agendas. Case in point being the fact that the majority of NASA's budget has been proven to be spent on terrestrial Earth and land-based studies. Listen to what I'm saying. A space agency that spends their space budget almost entirely on land-based studies since 1958 to 2018. That is 60 years, yet they claim to know space. But do they really?
Approximately 663 billion, 71 million is what NASA has spent in the last 60 years. Understand that each billion is 1,000 million, and there's 663 of them in this figure. Again, I say that NASA was created as a diversion to draw our attention away from the Antarctic ice ring, or the land that was found beyond it, for a list of reasons, including the preservation of the Copernican theory and the globe model of Earth, astrology, evolution, you name it, but none more important than just to keep what they had found secret. Space and all of the other sciences that hinge upon its beliefs became mandatory education, a safety mechanism against future discovery of what they had done.
Let me continue. Because space and how it has been portrayed has allowed them through visual aids and media to use our imaginations against us. So vast in its size and its content that our minds are kept busy conceiving an infinite number of space possibilities, hook, line, and sinker for the fishermen of man's mind. And they just keep throwing it out there because they know we're biting. And it's no different than a drug for which they've built a hunger or yearning for, knowing that we will be back, appetites ready and willing to believe what only they have to offer. Space, even though it's all just a magic show and their sleight of hand is rehearsed. NASA is insulated by corporate interests and industry due to their own culpability that comes with being an accomplice. Whether it's the corporate interests that profit and portray or industries that provide, they are all in it together. And this is how it happened. Once corporate interests and industry realized what NASA was doing, most likely a result of knowing the tolerances of what they were subcontracted by NASA to provide, and asking questions when NASA's claims went beyond those known tolerances or capabilities, both corporate interests and industry realized that they had become complicit in NASA's deception and would be looked upon as an accomplice. So a deal was made. A mutually beneficial agreement was reached. Consider this, if you will. Imagine if you were an industry or corporation and you discovered a way to shoot off a rocket claiming that it was carrying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of satellite and technology equipment, but instead pocketing that money completely off record while claiming on record that it had been spent. Wouldn't you do it just like NASA had been doing it before you had discovered that it was a hustle? Now consider how many satellites have been launched into space or lost, and you will begin to see the full extent and reasoning for portraying the fraud, and also how everyone else is involved, hence film industry and the tie that binds them, which may also explain why after so many years NASA stopped and decided to subcontract it out before they were found out, hence SpaceX, creating what is known as plausible deniability. And with that being said, allow me to refer back to the past in order to stitch together a much clearer picture. The first man to have ever been given or allowed to have the complete first-hand knowledge and information regarding the true form and shape of our world was named Richard Evelyn Byrd, born in 1888 to one of the first founding families of Virginia, who in 1926, just 23 years after the Wright brothers invented and flew the first airplane, was contracted and financed by none other than automobile heir Edsel Ford and oil heir John D. Rockefeller to be the first person to ever fly to the North Pole and back. a flight that remains shrouded in controversy, and after a time of being out due to injury, Richard E. Byrd was appointed to head an expedition to Antarctica in 1929, followed by 1934 and 40. In 41, he went on to fight in World War II, during which time, in 1943, to be exact, the atom bomb was created, ending his service after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the war was won in 1945. 1945 also being when the United Nations was created. The following year of 1946, he was requested to mount one of the largest expeditions to have ever sailed once again back to Antarctica as Operation High Jump, where he successfully mapped over 1.5 million square miles of Antarctica using aerial photography. Also to note that in 1946 marked the first successful launch by the Americans of the V-2 rocket number 13 that brought back photos taken from space, October 24th, 1946. The official record states that 1947 marked Admiral Byrd's last active service date, and that soon after he retired. However, this is where it gets interesting, because in 1947 was also the year that Roswell took place. 1947 is also the year that IMF, the International Monetary Fund, began. 1947 was when the sound barrier was broken at a little over 767 miles per hour, or Mach 1. The USA's Truman Doctrine, Marshall Plan, and National Security Act of 1947, which led to the National Security Council, or NSC, and then the CIA being established in the same year, just in time for the beginning of the Cold War. From 1947 to 1955, many other events are documented and further help to reveal their master plan's true size and scope. And I encourage anybody and everybody to go fit a timeline within the context of what I'm saying and see how it substantiates this theory. Oddly enough, in 1955 to 56, Admiral Byrd was asked out of retirement once again to command another Antarctic expedition called Operation Deep Freeze. Noteworthy to mention, during Admiral Byrd's life, there were only two places left to explore in the known world, and both Arctic and Antarctic were given to him over the course of his life, with space not being considered a realistic possibility until 1957, the same year as his death. All first-hand knowledge and information taken to the grave, and thus silenced just in time for the space race to start, and in 1958, NASA's creation. After Byrd's death, all further knowledge and explorations were strictly controlled and compartmentalized, never allowing any one person to know all of the pieces. And by 1959, the U.S. brought out the Antarctic Treaty, signed by 12 countries on December 1st, which was really a control mechanism, clearly stating that no person or nation would be allowed to ever build a permanent settlement upon the continent, thereby preventing any future nation from being able to claim sovereignty over any perceived claim, which is the reverse of the settle first method, a way to secure it without drawing attention or conflict to the continent, giving each nation its own space for non-invasive research, while at the same time placing limits upon the amount of fuel and resources that they could bring onto the shore to limit the range of how far they would be able to travel, effectively cutting off what they had found from anyone ever reaching it. And as far as the Arctic was concerned, they knew what was there and that they were much more technologically advanced than us, so they monitored and limited air traffic and put in place the DEW line, distant early warning, which became operational in 1957, the same year as Byrd's death. And after closing off both the Arctic and Antarctic, the upper atmospheric nuclear tests reached their peak during 1961 and 62, which were used to measure and map out the limits of the heavens, or the dome that is above us, and having the last piece of the puzzle so they would have a more complete picture of what they needed to hide, as well as what limitations they would have to work within. All attention was turned to space to occupy our minds, with very little attention being given to either the Antarctic or the Arctic until 1996, when the Arctic Council was formed and the Ottawa Declaration was signed by 8 countries, 34 years later, after the 1959 Antarctic Treaty was first signed. Here's another hint or breadcrumb. Ask yourself, if the globe model was correct and the majority of land sits above the equator, then why did 12 nations sign the Antarctic Treaty in 1957, but only 8 nations signed the Ottawa Declaration for the Arctic in 1996, 34 years later? It is my contention that as a result of Admiral Byrd and the discoveries that he made, the true form of our world, as well as what was beyond it, became for the U.S. what we know as the final frontier. However, a choice had to be made and a direction decided. So going back to the settle first method, it was agreed at the highest levels of military and government to hide the truth from the world and its people so that it could prevent anyone else from interfering, questioning, or challenging its efforts until it was able to investigate, explore, and also lay claim to whatever it was able to find first. This time spinning the subtle first mythology around to mean by any means necessary, by including us, regardless of any negative effects that it could have upon its own people, land, or its resources, choosing to use any and all things at its disposal in order to further their agenda for mankind. However, it seems that whatever they found was so great that it was decided that it would be in their best interest to mislead the world rather than to disclose their findings, as well as their efforts, including the reasonings behind how and why so many resources were used. And that is how and why NASA and space were created, to become a cover story drawing attention away from their true task while funneling all of the funding and resources they could ever need to complete their mission, using space as a metaphor for what was already taking place past the ice boundaries of our known world. This is the only conclusion that best explains all of the many unanswered questions that many of you have been asking. For example, why the sun simulator was created and has been seen being tested in our skies. Not only that, but the fact that we have found their patent. It could in fact be for a land beyond the reach of our sun's light, to be used as either a supplemental or secondary or even a primary light source to mimic the cycle of our sun here in order to produce crops there in a normal or expedited growth time span. But this is just one out of many things that have remained out of place and unexplained. It is my hope that once my theory of the surrogate civilization is heard, that it will spark both believers and skeptics alike to do further research to answer the questions for which up to now we could not find answers to due to our lack of proper context.
In closing, the Kardashev scale is space-based, and therefore it is incorrect. Think space within the dome instead of outside the dome for a better understanding. We are considered to be a type O civilization. They are trying to leapfrog the world we know by creating a type 1 civilization. It is their new world. The New World Order is the place that we occupy as a resource under their new world. We are being used as the energy and material source for their new world. Every lie has been designed to keep us from figuring it out, to keep us unaware and unsuspecting for as long as possible. They know that the only way to succeed will be to engineer our destruction, because if we ever found out what they had done, they would lose control of us forever.
No. Tell us about that.
Well, they used light beams to measure whether the Earth was moving, and they found that there was no movement. The Earth has to be moving 30 kilometers per second to complete its annual revolution, and they found out that it wasn't moving in a very precise. Michelson could have calculated it to 1/100th of what he got in his experiment. That's how sensitive his instruments were.
What did the experiment involve in terms of apparatus, so we can get a concrete understanding of what they found?
If the Earth is moving around the sun, and we shoot that light beam in the direction that the Earth is moving, okay, and then we shoot another light beam perpendicular to that, well, the one that's in the direction of the Earth's movement should be impeded in some way if it's moving through space, whereas this one that's going perpendicular would not be impeded.
Why not?
Because it's not going through space. It's just going north and south.
Okay.
Okay? And what they found, they expected to have a 30-kilometer difference between these two light beams. There was no difference. So the natural interpretation, and even Einstein admits this, Mach admits this, Born admits this, the natural interpretation is that the Earth isn't moving. So how do we get out of that? Well, you invent special relativity. And now you say, well, the reason that light beam wasn't affected when it went toward the motion of the Earth is because the apparatus shortened.
Huh?
Yeah, Michelson's apparatus shortened as it was going with the Earth in its orbit around the sun.
No, wait, you're telling me that the contraction of mass
Yes.
was invented to explain away the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment?
Yes, and that's what my book will tell you, and it's been admitted by all the scientists.
Well, isn't there any experimental confirmation that as you approach the speed of light, there's a contraction effect? The impression is that there's all kinds of experimental confirmation.
That was invented. There's no proof to it.
Really?
Yes, all the physicists will tell you there's no proof
Not
to
that
it.
I'm surprised, you understand.
Yeah.
I know what the scientific community is capable of in terms of mass deception. Evolution is a mass deception. But I wasn't aware that they don't really have any even purported scientific confirmation in terms of physical measurement.
No, nobody
of the contraction effect.
Nobody measured a contraction. But they put it into a mathematical formula called the Lorentz transform, and it's probably the most famous equation used in physics today.
Does anyone expressly admit that, hey, we had to come up with this contraction effect because otherwise we're stuck with a motionless
Yes,
Earth?
the very guy who invented it.
Tell me what he
Lorentz.
admitted.
Heinrich Lorentz says, I don't have any other explanation to this experiment of Michael Somorley unless I contract the apparatus. Otherwise, we're going to have to believe the Earth is standing still in space.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Can you give an approximate page reference for me to your book? I want to go back and read that right away.
I'll send you an email. I'll show you.
Everything is moving. In other words, all the stars in the universe are moving. How could we possibly determine if we are the center of this moving universe?
Over the past decade or so, we have seen out to the very limits of the observable cosmos. We've mapped its largest structure, the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe according to the standard Big Bang model of cosmology. What we have discovered is shocking.
On the very largest scales, we see a pattern of really big hot and cold spots which line up around a special axis, which has been dubbed the axis of evil. And that's quite puzzling. Why is there a special direction in space?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you asked that because in 2009 they set up a probe called the Planck probe. It just came back with the results in 2013 in March. I don't know if you heard about it or not.
No.
The European Space Agency set it up in cooperation with NASA. This was the third attempt that they had to nullify the data that they were finding in the cosmic microwave background radiation that permeates the whole universe, that the Earth was in the center of the universe. The first one they set up was in 1990 called the COBE probe. It came back, showed the Earth was in the center. The WMAP was the second one in 2001, came back with the same data. And what they tried to do was say that this was all an error. It was some kind of misreading, or it was there was contamination in the apparatus or the sky or whatever. So they sent up a third probe in 2009, just came back in 2013. Guess what? Same exact results. Same exact results. And what were the interpretations? Well, the Earth has to be in the center of the universe. And we have somebody quoted in our book, Lawrence Krauss of the Arizona State University, who says, yeah, this means we're in the center of the universe.
Let's pick up on that point a bit. You mentioned that the background radiation, microwave radiation in the universe, supplied data from which it became apparent that the Earth was in fact at the center of a moving universe. Explain why that is so. Why do these data confirm that?
Okay. Well, the Big Bang Theory predicts that there was an explosion 13.7 billion years ago. Okay? So if there was an explosion, then that means the explosion had to come out equal on all sides of the sphere. It had to be what they call homogeneous. Okay? And that's naturally accepted. It's like homogenized milk.
Sure.
You know, you shake that thing up and you can't see one place from another place. It's all homogenized. And that's what they needed for this Big Bang universe. What they found when they sent these three probes up, yeah, some of it was homogeneous, but it's like having a bowl full of Jell-O with two swords going through the middle of the Jell-O.
What are the swords?
The swords are the orientation of the cosmic microwave background radiation throughout the universe.
What do you mean by the orientation?
Okay, there's hot and cold spots they found. It's not homogeneous. There's hot and cold spots in this microwave background radiation, and if you align all these cold spots, it forms an X through the whole universe.
Unbelievable.
And guess what's in the middle?
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
This is what the data shows.
This is what the data
shows. Okay, come on now. What mainstream publication recognizes
The
this?
University of Michigan, Dragon Hutterer, Craig Copey, Glenn Starkman. These are all the guys who have done all the work on this microwave radiation. They write it in their papers. They wrote one in 2004, 2008, 2010, and 2012, and they're writing another one on the Planck probe.
So you're saying these space probes were designed to explain away the X represented by the hot and cold
They wanted
spots.
to make sure it wasn't an accident.
Okay, so there were how many probes in total?
Three. in 20 years.
And you're saying that all three confirmed what then?
That the Earth is in the center of the universe.
On the basis of the hot and cold spots?
Yes.
Whose alignment represents an X.
An X.
And at the center of the X is the Earth.
Right, and they call that X the axis of evil. That was coined.
Scientists call that the axis of evil.
Called it the axis of evil. That was coined in 2004 when Bush went into Iraq. Remember, he called them the axis of evil. So this cosmologist just picked it up and said, yeah, well, here's the axis of evil right here in the universe.
So, in other words, they're enraged by the finding.
Oh, yeah.
Because it upsets their worldview, which has to displace the Earth's special position in the universe.
Yeah.
Which fits in rather nicely with a divinely created universe.
Right.
Made for man.
All of cosmology is based on what we call the Copernican principle. Every piece of data that they get in their telescope has to be filtered through the Copernican principle. And that's what the Big Bang Theory does, NASA does it, ESA does it, everybody does it. The upsetting thing about this microwave radiation is it just totally defies the Copernican principle.
The last probe confirmed that as well, you say?
The last probe, yeah. As a matter of fact,
where was that result reported? Obviously everywhere, but give me some examples.
March 21st in the European Space Agency report. As a matter of fact, it's in our movie.
What's their attempt to explain the latest probe's findings away?
Anomalies.
Anomalies?
Mm-hmm.
And all the anomalies conveniently line up in a non-anomalous way to verify their model.
Right.
This is amazing. So this brings us to the question of motive. You've been hinting at it throughout the discussion. There's obviously a motive at work here. Many people have recognized, not just believers, not just Catholics, but people like David Berlinski, for example, that science has become an ideology. Maybe you could take up that theme as we close out this interview.
Yeah.
Isn't there an ideological component?
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say it's a religion. Science is a religion today. It's scientism. And they've already got the parameters within which they want to interpret the data, and they're not going to go outside those parameters. This is a perfect example. You do get some of them that break out of it, and they say, yeah, well, this defies the Copernican principle. We've read many papers like that, and we quote them in our book. Okay? But the motivation is, if the Copernican principle is wrong, that means all of science is wrong. Everything, cosmogony, paleontology, cosmology, archaeology, everything now becomes suspect because we can't support these long ages. We can't support this vast universe. As a matter of fact, we're in the center of it. How does that happen? Well, it's not going to happen by chance. Someone had to put it there, you see, and that's what they're scared of. That's the motivation.
Research Don Pettit, The Tyranny of the Rocket Equation.
Tyranny of the rocket equation.
It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to talking to you again.